I'm going to bring Councillor Trish Hardy in, but this afternoon when we arrived, we went straight to the Metro Mayor's office. And Yuha and myself met with Kate and her team, Kate Farrell, who's here today, and Peter, who's with her as well. It was the most impressive experience. Steve came in, Steve Rotherham, Metro Mayor, met him, and we met 10 of the people who were working in the Housing First team. I had no idea so much work was being done. It takes time to set it up, but already there's some really good work happening, and it's really impressive. And I was very, very moved. I had no idea this amount of work was actually happening already in the city region. So to tell us a bit more, Councillor Trish Hardy.
Thank you, and I think it's a really good mix of our presentations because it's interesting to hear what you can achieve if you continue with a housing first model for a long period of time. But we're just at our infancy of that journey, and I'd be interested by a show of hands if anybody actually knew that Liverpool was committed to a housing first model. Yeah, I don't think it's very well known here. I'm not sure it's as well known across the city region then. But for me, this is a really important role that I've got, and I'm delighted to be working alongside Steve and indeed all of the other leaders across Merseyside, because tackling homelessness is one of the core objectives that they see every day and really want to work together to tackle and achieve. And for me, this is a personal journey as well, because when I'm not being a politician, my background is actually in housing. And in the early 2000s, I worked in housing in Knowsley and managed a homelessness service directly. And at that stage, my three options were, whenever anybody came to see me about homelessness, was to put them in some really poor quality temporary accommodation, to use the company credit card to put them into some bed and breakfast accommodation, and perhaps we'd sort it out on Monday. If they were still there, they more than likely they would have disappeared from the service. Or to give them some really low quality housing, because in the early 2000s there was still a lot of property on Merseyside that wasn't actually was still in social housing that people weren't living in. But again, we didn't always provide the services to support people to stay in those properties, so we thought that if we gave them the key to the house, actually everything would magically be resolved, and it wasn't that. But I think through the 2000s, what I saw was that there was a different change, and when we started to work together, housing and people together, we began to see elements of rough sleeping decline in this country. And it's a real travesty, I think, that actually where we are today is we've got all of those increases of homelessness, and that's why we've ended up having to bring this housing first model back first time into Liverpool and into this country, because while you've been moving forward, it feels like as a nation we've been moving backwards to some extent on the homelessness and broader housing agenda. Okay. So Housing First, we're one of the three pilots in the country really for delivering a Housing First model. The country announced that Housing First would be implemented back in 2016-17, but we were ahead of the game really, because in Merseyside, Crisis had worked with the Liverpool City Region leaders and all of the homeless providers in the locality to talk about how we could do something different, recognising that street homelessness and all of the people in absolute crisis, that we needed to be doing something different. So when it became on the government's agenda to tackle homelessness, we were very well placed because we already had a huge body of work that had identified Liverpool, and we had a solution in place to be working towards. So that's what devolution as an option gave us really, because we were ahead of the game, so that when the money came as a pilot area, we were able to take it, and we've been given 7.3 million, which in the context of the money that you've been sharing with us this evening doesn't seem a lot, but that's for a 3-year pilot. And as I said, this is in addition to all of the statutory homelessness services that the local authorities continue to maintain. But I don't think, £7.3 million, what I want to talk to really, I can be a little bit political in the way that other people can't, because how did we get here is the question I always ask ourselves. And I think we're here because we've seen 10 years of austerity, 10 years of austerity that have pushed people into absolute crisis, 10 years of austerity that have taken away support services, we've taken away elements of our safety net within our system, and it was a safety net that always allowed some people to slip through, but what we've got now is more people slipping through that safety net. It's not just about local authorities have lost over 50% of their funding in Merseyside, so that means there's 50% less to spend on services like homelessness. But local authority funding isn't all of the situation, because actually our local NHS services have seen their funding decrease as well, which has had impacts on mental health services. We haven't got as many social workers, and also we haven't got the same levels of addiction and support services there as well. And in my opinion, the country won't have a conversation about what those addiction support services need to be. So we're very much in a draconian position often with those people. Rather than supporting people, we try and force them to change without giving them the help. So all of that combined with, I think, less money in people's pockets, less money in families' household incomes, puts pressure on a system that was already creaking. And is it any wonder, therefore, that we've seen the homelessness levels rise? You know, it's a disgrace. I stand here with an absolute commitment, and I know if Steve was here personally, he'd also have the same commitment, that we don't want to see homelessness on the streets of Liverpool, anywhere within the Liverpool City Region, and we're determined to try and work to find a solution in which we can, you know, support people to be able to take the housing opportunities that we'll be able to present to them, and hopefully move it forward and demonstrate to the country that this can work. And ultimately, it will save money from the wider system, because actually, if people are housed, if they're not causing us some of we're not crisis managing all of the time, that saves money in the wider system. So that's why you need invest to save sometimes. In austerity times, you need it even more, I think. So it was interesting to hear you, Annie, presented 7 principles, I think, about what the Housing First model is in Finland. And we've got 7 principles as well in Merseyside. And ours starts with the same as yours, I think, which is a human right, that everybody has a right to a home. So that's our basic founding principle. Our second principle is that flexible support needs to be there for as long as people need it, because unlike previous, supporting people-style models of support to people, this isn't where someone signs up for a service for 6 months and we hope that they're going to be magically fixed at the end of the 6-month period and can maintain housing, can maintain stability in their lives. For some people, they may only need 2 months service. For other people, as you said, I think your longest was 5 years. So we've got to be committed to actually, it's tailored around individual needs. Housing and support services are separate entities, but they do link together, and that's our third principle really about how we move this forward. And similarly to you, our fourth principle is really that individuals should have control. This isn't housing first, come to us and we'll tell you where you will live. We'll tell you what support services you have, because that won't work. People aren't able to take that kind of transformational change into their life if they don't feel that they own it. So we work alongside people to say, how can we help you back into housing? What is the type of housing that you want? Where do you want to live? How can we support you? And we give them that choice, and we try and support them in that journey back into, as I call it, basically stability in life, because that's what we need to get to. Our fifth principle is that it's very, very active engagement. So for us, this is about, if you signed up to Housing First, we won't just give you the keys to the property. We'll be pretty much checking that you move into the property. We'll be checking and helping you choose your furniture for the property. We'll be checking and supporting you to make sure that you go to those appointments in the NHS and all of those wider appointments that you need to help you in those places. But for me, and one of the things I've loved when I've heard the stories from the team is, when it's your birthday, we'll also send you a birthday card, not because that's actually on the checklist of things to do, but because we've got a service that cares about people as individuals, and we try to work with them on that basis. The fifth is really recognising that as individuals, despite what crisis we're in, we've always got our strengths, and we need to play to those individual strengths that people have got and bring them out to the service, because that's what's going to help them not just sustain the tenancy, their home, but actually help them back into the job market and help them be more secure. And then our final one is that, harm reduction as an approach is used, really. So we're all about making people's lives safer for them as individuals as well. So how are we doing that, really? How do we get people together? We've got a team of 20 at the moment, and we've only been started since July 2019. We've got a caseload of 100 people that we're actually actively helping at the moment, and so far the dashboard of this week, 11 of those people have been housed. So within 3 months, we've already got 11 people into properties. This is a 3-year pilot, so the maximum funding that we've got to help will be around 400 people. The challenges, I just wanted to talk about wider system challenges, just left in my 2 minutes. You know, ending homelessness is, we want to do it, but we can't do it just on the resources that we've got within a 3-year pilot. This is going to take something that needs more money from central government and more commitment. I'd also say this is a wider system challenge. Housing First isn't our only approach to homelessness, and that's, I think, something that we'll need to think about in the future. At the moment, this is a pilot, and all of our other statutory services run alongside that. So there's going to be lessons, I think, about what we're doing really well in Housing First, how we can move that, and does this approach become the statutory basis for the country? It has in Finland, and if it works, I think we'd like to see that happening here as well. You know, this series of seminars is really about devolution, and I think that the devolution agenda has shown that, you know, Merseyside, we've got a unique generally approach to things. We went to government, we took our evidence, and we've said that we can do it. They've challenged us, but they've given us the £7.3 million to achieve this over 3 years. If we were in a devolution area, we wouldn't be getting this money, and we wouldn't have Housing First in our area. So this is a practical example of how devolution is delivering for the residents and the citizens of us. You know, for me, I often think that the great thing about why would we look at homelessness on a devolution basis, well, actually, we're so good at putting boundaries around localities, boundaries around services, but in all of our day-to-day lives, we don't operate like that. We're individuals, and we move around the city region, we move around the services, and that's why actually making sure there's a kind of like seamless approach between all of those boundaries is going to help us and help us resolve this homelessness crisis that we're seeing in front of us. And I think I'll pretty much end it there, but happy to take questions later. Thank you.